So I'm going to suggest you turn this video off if you don't want to hear me talk about Floowandereeze in the metagame once again in Season 20 of Master Duel. We're going to take a look at one of my more recent matches that I think exemplifies pretty well some of the pain points that I've expressed with not just this deck, but just the game in general when it comes to Konami thinking that they need to nerf decks by banning or limiting certain cards and then forgetting about them on the ban list, even though those decks really aren't that oppressive and or have fallen off or been power crept. So in this instance, I want to exemplify anxiety point number one in playing Floowandereeze, in that, you know, whenever you win the coin flip, you kind of just have a little anxiety in hoping that you draw a hand that's playable. This opening hand technically is not playable. We have to hope to unbrick with a Pot of Extravagance, and of course this can get ashed, which means our turn ends because, well, I guess not. We can activate Unexplored Winds, put back Snarl, and try to draw one. Unlikely to unbrick us though, drawing one card, because we essentially need to draw Robina, which is one of three in the deck, and the opponent knows what we're on once we play this card, and they can easily combo and OTK us. Saving grace is we have a shifter, for some reason limited to 2, because I guess this card beats the best decks in the format, and Konami doesn't want that to be too powerful to stop cards like or decks like Tearlaments, Branded, and D-Link. So thankfully the opponent opts not to ash if they have it on the Extravagance, so we're going to be able to draw 2 and hope to unbrick. Now I want to be very clear here. We end up drawing the Robina, but it's very, very likely that we don't unbrick here because there's only 6 cards in the deck that could unbrick our hand here technically. Either we draw 1 of 3 Advent of Adventure or 1 of 3 Robina. We could draw into like 2 very specific cards, like the 1 of Map and any small bird, which will unbrick our hand because Map is the card that unbricks Floowandereeze. It's a consistency card, but Konami has limited that to 1, so you know the odds you draw it are pretty slim. Not usually a problem. Again, it was at 2, it was limited to 1. We've been able to manage without it. Anxiety inducing point, I guess this is number 3 now. So the first one was unbricking, the second one was hoping that you don't get interrupted on the cards that help you unbrick, like the pot cards. And then the third one is now I don't actually have any interruption or any way to dodge interruption because again Map is at 1, and if I don't have Advent of Adventure, I can't really play around any interruption. Because again, Map allows you for your extra normal summon, so if you do get stopped on your normal summon, you hopefully can extend with Map, which normally you can because it also puts a bird in the banish pile that you can bring back so that you can continue to normal summon, right? It plays around 1 interruption. Advent of Adventure allows you to dodge an Imperm or a Veiler. That's it. Still doesn't help you play around Ash. The only card that helps you really play around Ash is Map, right? Because it gives you the additional normal summon. So again, anxiety inducing point number 3, you normal summon your Robina, we still get stopped, our turn still ends if the opponent has Ash or Imperm, right? Again, this is the deck that we've chosen to play, so these are pain points we have to accept. Totally understandable. So with this in mind, again, 2 of the more common hand traps. If we do get Imperm or Ash, obviously we don't switch for Eaglin, we don't get the Empin, and that's it, right? Our turn is over, the opponent likely OTKs us next turn, so it is what it is. Now, of course, you can make the argument, well, you know, this deck isn't supposed to be invincible, Quantum. Why are you complaining about these things? Every deck should have its weakness. Yes, I agree. Floowandereeze still has significant weaknesses, but this is a weakness inherent to the deck itself. You don't even need to have anything for me to brick on my cards and just lose the game. Not because of skill. Well, I guess you could technically call it skill. It's, you know, deck building. You build your deck, you brick, there's nothing you can do. In the TCG, when Map, Empin, and Pot of Prosperity are all at 3, all of which are limited to 1 in Master Duel, the deck in the TCG still bricks. So everything is going well for us here. We get our Empin on field. We only bring back Eaglin so that in case the opponent draws Ash for turn, we end up chain blocking with the Robina. Now, I've advanced the game state here a little bit, but you may have thought, Quantum, you know, you opened Dreaming Town and you opened Unexplored Winds. This is anxiety inducing point number 4 or 5, I don't know which one we're on now. But essentially, yes, you are reliant on opening some of your power spells so that you can search for the other ones because your end board with Floowandereeze is actually very weak going first now. And somebody has actually commented on one of my videos, they prefer going second with this deck because they actually rely on non-engine like Evenly Matched to break boards and then play from there. And I totally agree. I addressed this point in the videos last season where I put Fossil Dyna into the deck, where I said the end board of Empin plus like the spell or trap is not actually enough because it's very easily broken or played through with combo decks, right? Combo decks are very powerful in this game despite Max C. And even if you play Max C in Floowandereeze, it actually doesn't give you all that much gas to go off of, especially when you go first. This deck really lacks going first power now because of the limits to map and Dreaming Town. It's really amazing to me, this is the point I want to make, that Konami thinks that despite the game being power crept so much by Sprite, tier limits, the branded support, how much more powerful D-Link got with the introduction of Bestials, with Labyrinth, etc., that they still think that Floowandereeze needs to be nerfed. And this was a tier 3 deck at its best. It's just because it doesn't end up playing hard into tier limits and branded boards that they think that, hey, this deck might sometimes beat tier limits and branded, and people spent money on those packs. We don't want them to lose to Floowandereeze. Okay, fair enough. That's how it feels, at least. Again, I could be coming across as very salty, maybe a little bit like a crybaby. I understand that, but this is my perspective on how I kind of see things going. So I want to be very clear, right? You have to open up these power spells in order to at least have a chance to properly interrupt the opponent. Now, again, keep in mind, Floowandereeze isn't a combo deck. It's not a combo deck. It is a control deck. So you don't set up the biggest board. You're not branded setting up like a bunch of fusion monsters that have a bunch of interruptions, or like tier limits, which is kind of the same deal. You set up a very small end board, and you attempt to control the game by putting up dynamic interruptions during the opponent's turn. This allows you to play around specific board breakers like evenly matched. If you watch my previous videos where I went up against a mirror match, you can see that we got decimated by an evenly matched in that matchup, right? We lost a lot of our important one-ofs, and we essentially had to play with like half of a deck, right? Because once you lose your tribute monsters with Floowandereeze, your game is over. And that's fair. The deck should have a weakness, and that is one of its inherent weaknesses. But it shouldn't be to the point where you sacrifice your core engine pieces. And you can see the end board that we set up here. The Empin didn't search for map, which would have been very strong. You have map, Dreaming Town, Unexplored Winds, which again, you can't go for double Empin plays to search out your spells and traps because you have one Empin. You can only search for one. So if you don't hard open the other ones, your end board inherently is a lot weaker. But the reason we don't search for map despite opening the Dreaming Town and the Unexplored Winds is because that leaves us open to evenly match. A deck that normally could play around evenly, you have to search for Advent for two reasons. The first is if you do get even lead here, you can activate your Dreaming Town, or sorry, your Advent of Adventure, banish your Empin face up. Then off of the evenly, you banish the Unexplored Winds, which you can search another one of because you play two in the deck at least. And you banish your Advent, not a big deal because you can also, again, still play two in your deck. If you opt to activate your Dreaming Town in response to the opponent attempting to go battle phase, and you put your Apex on board, well, again, you saw in my previous video, if you watch that one, the Floowandereeze Mirror, your Apex can get baited out with something else, in which case, you know, now you're totally susceptible to any kind of board break, or you open yourself up to Super Poly, right? Apex and Empin make a Garua, and your Apex can't negate that, and Super Poly is a common board breaker now, especially in tier limits. So inherently, the way that the format has evolved has weakened Floowandereeze. Again, another reason why I don't think that this deck needs to be limited the way it is. Again, I could be wrong, you can argue against me, I understand, but this is again some of the points that I see in the game. So this is the end board we have to go with, and again, that's fine, we've adapted the deck to play based on the limitations and the current format, right? So the opponent reveals Druid's Room during the end phase. That's great for us actually because it means no evenly matched is coming. And the second reason why you search Advent here, I didn't really explain that, but in this rotation, if I end up activating my Dreaming Town, I summon my Eaglin, I get back my Robina, I can activate Advent, banish the Empin here, and off of Robina search for Toucan, and then summon Toucan, bring back the Empin, use Unexplored Winds and a small bird, bring out the Empin, you know, send one of the opponent's card to the graveyard, and then off of the Empin, continue to summon either another tribute monster or whatever I search with Eaglin, right, which would be a tribute monster, and I end up getting 2 outs with Unexplored Winds. Again, this is a very specific combo. I hard opened the Dreaming Town, which is a 1 of, Unexplored Winds, which is a 2 of, and I ended up potting into a Robina, which is 1 of 3. So this is a 3-card combo in order to get the Eaglin, the Empin, and the Advent of Adventure, which was again very easily interruptible by an Ash or Imperm, which again are very common hand traps. So the deck has a lot of weaknesses, right? And the cards that allow you to maybe even play through 1 or 2 interruptions, let alone play through what the opponent's combo is. Like your deck gets stopped by hand traps and your deck gets easily board broken by other engines like branded. You might say, well, Empen is a floodgate. Yeah, but all it takes is for them to bring out Mirror Jade in defense mode, and then they out your Empen, right? It's not very hard. This deck is actually very easy to beat. So how I'm going on these win streaks with it, I don't know. Anyways, the opponent ends up revealing a normal summon of Wagon, and this is a tell that, you know, their hand may not be the best. So at this point, I'm like, I'm gonna out your Wagon with the Unexplored Winds, and I'm gonna put up Apex so that I can negate one extender in your hand. So if you have like a Deer Note or a Foxy Tune, I'm going to negate it with Apex and put you on. You need a second extender, which is very likely with these decks. They could have Emergency Teleport, they could play Triple Tactics Talent, they could play a number of different things that allow them to play through this board here. They bait one Apex negate, then my interruptions are over. I have nothing else to interrupt the opponent with, right? And this is again why going first with Floowandereeze is so much weaker now. Once you baited this Apex, what interruption do I have? I don't summon anymore. I don't do anything, right? I mean, Saving Grace is, yeah, I drew the 1 of 2 Shifter, which again, another limitation that hurts this deck. And that likely will limit the opponent enough that they won't be able to use their full combo potential because they likely need their graveyard. But if you do have an extender past Apex, you can likely break this board very easily. Again, thankfully the opponent doesn't, and that's going to be the game. And we take a look at the opponent's deck list here. They were indeed on triple Ash, triple Imperm, even a Ghost Ogre, but you can see they could have had E-Tele, they could have had triple Tactics, like I said. There's a lot of extenders. They could have had Deer Note, Foxy Tune, etc. that could easily extend through one interruption, which is all we were really able to put up with the Floowandereeze deck. And again, if we did not have Unexplored Winds, if we did not hard draw Unexplored Winds, we wouldn't have been able to out the opponent's Wagon, which means we could have searched for Ryza and spun the Wagon back to the top of the deck. But then again, if the opponent had one extender, they just extend with that because we wouldn't have the Apex to negate. So we needed the Unexplored Winds plus the Apex in order to A, out the threat that was put on the board, and B, play through another potential extender that the opponent might have had. So I hope you understand what I'm saying, and that this deck is very limited in terms of what it can do, and it's why playing it just seems very overwhelming. Now this leads me to my next point, in that, well, Quantum, why are you complaining? They clearly want you to move on. There's new cards coming to the game. You need to move on from this deck and play a better deck. I see that you have Labyrinth, I see that you have Sword Soul, I see that you have Tearlaments, you have Bestial Punk, you have Branded, you know, there's a lot of decks you can play. You said Sprite is like one of the best decks in the format, which I will say I take back now, because ever since the Grapha Fusion came out, which, yeah, I have it in this deck here, this deck is clearly the best deck now, once again. But this leads me to my next point, in that being somebody who works 9 to 10 hours a day, being somebody who has obligations outside of work as well, again, you see it on my match history whenever I show you like my progress. I play just a couple matches a day. You know, sometimes those matches are 3 or 4 minutes, sometimes they're 10 minutes, but I don't actually play all that much. And I started playing this game again in November of 22, and I've been playing Floowandereeze ever since then. And I like this deck. I built it in the TCG. I've invested real money into physical cards, thousands of dollars actually in that like 8-month time span, because I like this game. I used to play it back in the day in my childhood, right, from 2002 to 2007, you know, Chaos Control days. And I'm really considering just retiring this game now, because clearly this game isn't made for somebody like me who actually can't dedicate 5, 6, 7 hours or multiple hours a week in order to consistently learn new decks, consistently upgrade those decks, learn new matchups, because they end up nerfing other decks. And this is what I meant when I said in the beginning, you know, they ban stuff or limit stuff like, let's say, Salamangreat Gazelle. Salamangreat is not a threat to the format. I mean, they ended up unlimiting it, I think, right, Gazelle? But how long was it limited when it didn't need to be limited, right? Like, you put these cards on the limited and ban lists because the deck might be slightly good, not even top tier. And this is what I'm afraid of, is like they limit Empen and they're just going to forget about it for like 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ban lists. And then they might eventually bring it back off the ban list. By that time, I'm not playing this game anymore, right? I've spent the time to learn this deck. I've spent the time learning the interactions, learning the matchups, and I don't really think that it's fair that there are other decks that are clearly much better than mine that I'm playing, even if my deck was, you know, at half power, even if Empen was unlimited, even if map was at 2. These decks are still by far and away way stronger than Floowandereeze. Like, there's so many cards that just straight up counter and beat my deck. And these decks, yes, they do have their own weaknesses, of course, Like, you know, I have to draw one of 2 Shifter, and then Tearlaments is likely beat, or at least for that turn, right? Because Shifter is not forever. But it just feels unfair. And again, you can say, well, you know, Floowandereeze is an unfair deck. It's a deck that should never have been made. It's very annoying to play against. It's a control deck, and like I said, it's not that hard to beat, honestly, especially with the way the game has been power crept with Power of the Elements and stuff. This deck is by no means invincible. Like I said, in TCG, you have 3 map, you have 3 Empin, you have 3 prosperity, and even in a, you know, even going first for the first match, I know it's a best of 3 format in TCG, this deck still has consistency issues. This deck still gets beat hard with Kashtira coming to the game. You know, Fenrir banish your Empin face down, what are you gonna do, right? You just lose at that point against Kashtira or any deck that splashes Fenrir, which every deck will, because every other deck special summons, and to a Fenrir, the card is going to be splashable in every deck, literally every single deck. So, you know, I'm not looking forward to playing the format after Kashtira comes. I'm not looking forward to playing this game in general with the limitations that Konami, or the way that Konami kind of handles their ban lists and stuff. And for that reason, I think that this game might be retired soon on my end. So I don't know. Season 20 might be my last try. I might just try to go up to Diamond 1. I don't think I'm gonna bother trying to grind through Master again. And I think I'm gonna switch over to Lorcana. You know, a fresh game, looks pretty exciting. Love Disney. So we'll see what happens. But that's it for this video. If you made it this far, thank you. Quantum is out, I guess.